Philly Startup Leaders presents Founder Factory 2015. This program was recorded January 13th, 2015 at The Hub at Cirrus Center in Philadelphia. This year's Founder Factory is brought to you by these sponsors: Broadpath, the Innovation Center at 3401, Startup PHL, and Morgan Lewis. In video 4, a keynote speech by Rudy Karsan, founder and CEO of Kinnexa.
I am super excited to introduce our next speaker. Kenexa is one of those software as a service companies that you heard Diane talk about, and started right here in Philadelphia, ran for over 25 years, and went through venture capital and IPO and ultimately acquisition by IBM. It's a fantastic Philadelphia success story led by a very, very exciting speaker who I can't wait to hear talk. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rudy Karsan, founder and CEO of Kenexa.
Thanks, Rick. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Come on. That's better. As we were planning for this session, you know what Rick says to me? I'm looking for a sacrificial lamb before lunch. I'm looking for somebody old and fat. You qualify. So if you leave during the middle of the presentation, just do me a favor. Do thumbs up, which means you're okay, I'm hungry. Thumbs down is you suck, I'm getting out of here. Is that a deal? Deal. How many of you are true founders? Raise your hands. Raise your hands up, don't be ashamed. And the rest of the people are leeches on the founders? Is that kind of how it works? Or are parts of young organizations? Which is it? Leeches of employees, which one? How many are leeches? Like VC guys and stuff like that. And how many are employees in kind of small startups? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of the startups here are under a year old? Raise your hands. And how many of you are pre-revenue? Raise your hands. Okay, so the ones that are pre-revenue, what the hell are you doing here? You should be out there hustling, trying to get some money. So seriously, why are you here?
To learn.
To learn or to get money? If it's to get money, remember, that's the lifeblood of the organization. If it's to learn, you'd better maximize it. Because the probability of you getting to $1 million in revenue is, guess what? Does anyone know the answer to that? Start up to $1 million. What's the probability of getting to $1 million? 6%. 94% of you won't make it. Now what's interesting are the people that are here have virtually doubled your chances of making it to $1 million. Because you care enough to come here. And what I'd like to do is share a couple of stories and then open it up for Q&A. And we'll keep going. I was told it's still around lunch, so 12:15. You get bored, we'll stop. Let me share with you our story. And let me share with you what I learned through our story. In my life, I've started, call it a dozen different companies. In most cases, I've been a flaming failure, which has allowed me to be introspective enough to learn from the lessons. A couple of them, we kind of hit the cover off the ball. The Connexxus Story, it's kind of the entrepreneur story, right? You start it, you screw up, you take it public. As you recover from your screw ups, then you sell it, and you got the big B there, and you live happily ever after, right? That's kind of the story. However, along the way, the first thing I learned about myself is I'm always scared shitless. Okay, fear is a constant companion for me personally, and I can only speak from my own frame of reference. That level of anxiety is so dramatic, it actually affects the way I behave. So let me share a personal story with you. In 2005, as we're taking the company public, in June, and I'll give you the date, 22nd, so you can check it out. We were getting ready to price. It's lunchtime, we're in Chicago. We've gone through 9 days of the roadshow. The Dow is heading for its second day with a 100-point drop. Now that meant something in those days. The Dow hadn't dropped by more than 100 points in its entire, whatever, more than 25 times in the preceding 25 years or 50 years or some phenomenal number like that. And I am absolutely terrified because the pricing range we're given is between 14 and 16. And our bank says to us, we can't hold the book together at the bottom of your range. We can't price it at 14. Rudy, you have two choices. We can do it at 12, or we just keep the book open through the weekend. It was so scary that I actually abandoned the final 2 roadshow meetings and let the CFO handle it. And we were in Chicago, it's the summer, I just basically went out to the park and started calling people. I called up our financial partners, I called up our board members, I called up individuals and friends of mine that had put a lot of money into the company. And I realized at that point in time that no one was going to help me. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Oh, okay, she's hungry. No one, absolutely no one was going to help me. I was totally on my own. Financial partners that had literally put in multi-million dollars in it said, you're on the ground, it's your call. And I didn't know what to do. Because if you keep the book open, the underwriters will refuse to price it on a Friday night or on a Monday night. You only price IPOs on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Which means we had to go through Friday, the weekend, Monday, and we could blow up the entire company because we had only got about $5 million in cash and we'd used $3 million up for the IPO. We were down to $2 million, which was barely about 3 weeks worth of operating cash. What do you do? At that point in time, what do? Do you take the money? Now, knowing full well that if you took the money, you're going in at 12, you're expecting to do it at 15, you have just given yourself a haircut of about 25% of your personal wealth that you can never recover from. Because once the distribution takes place at 12, that money is never recoverable. This is a one-way mistake. Being scared, I decided that I would do the deal. Now, if I had been a little smarter, if I had been less scared, I would have kept the book open. Because right on Friday, after we priced at 12, the market shot up by over 100 points, and Monday just took off again. It was in the final lull before it took off. And what that taught me at that point in time was, never again am I going to enter into any sort of a battle without data on my side. If I had the data, I would have known that these kind of events without any sort of a macro event like the 9/11 event is not sustainable. Unless there is major breakage, there's no Lehman taking place, there's no 9/11 taking place, none of these things, it would have captured back up again. I just didn't have the data. And that lack of data caused absolutely the single worst decision in my life. I cost myself 25% of my net worth, and I could never, ever, ever recover from that mistake. Now let me share another story with you of what happened in 2012. I had on the street said publicly in 2011 that we would always remain an independent company. And lo and behold, right after I made that statement, Oracle bought one of our competitors called Taleo. Shortly thereafter, SAP bought SuccessFactors, another competitor. So now I said, this is a space that is now going to get dominated by the elephants. And we're little mice and gazelles running around. It's going to be hard for us to coexist. And we've got another elephant coming into the pasture by the name of Workday. This time I collected all the data. So I'm not going to make the same mistake I made in 2005. And so I spent 2 months figuring out who all the prospective buyers were of Kenexa, got in touch with our banker, which was Lazard, and said, on a no-names basis, arrange for a meeting with the following 2 or 3 companies, with IBM being at the top of that list. You guys have those relationships in place. Please make sure you arrange for those meetings on a no-names basis. And if you have enough of a relationship with the bankers and you trust them enough, you can do things of that sort. On the Thursday that I was supposed to be in Boston, where we were going to put the final finishing touches on the presentation to be made to those 3 buyers, I got a call a week and a half before that event saying that the general manager out of IBM that had partnered with us on one of our applications was in town and wanted to do a meet and greet. And I said, just one-on-one? He said, yep, I'm thinking escalation. Got to get the ops person, got to get the service person online and be ready, willing, and able to be able to take that information, because it's extremely crucial since we're going to see IBM. Our bankers are going to take us to IBM a week and a half from now. So on that Tuesday, I walk into our conference room. The GM, who told me he was coming on his own, lied to me. He was with somebody else. That person was the head of business development of IBM. And I said, I have a really simple question. Are you here to sell me IBM or buy Kinnexa? That was his reaction. He said, you dumb shit, you can't afford us. I said, we hadn't even sat down yet. I said, how much and when? He said, we have a term sheet ready. It's going to be 42, and we can close in 8 weeks. I said, not good enough on either one of how much and when. It's got to be 6 weeks. And we're going to move the number up, and I'll tell you what it is. 48 hours later, we counter-offered on the term sheet. I was at TED Talks the following week in Scotland, negotiated the balance of the deal, and signed off within 7 days. I accepted that deal in 3 minutes. We hadn't even sat down, in principle. I had the data. Fear was no longer in essence. I knew exactly what I was doing, because I'd spent 2 months preparing for that crucial conversation. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen. Now, had we not been fortunate, and had we already had that meeting a week later, I don't think we would have gotten the premium we did. So maybe some of the 25% that I lost, I made up just through fortune. I'd like to believe that so that I'm not a complete fuck up, but being a partial fuck up, I take what I can get. Okay? That's basically what it boils down to. The second lesson that I've learned is focus matters. And this came to me extremely vividly. And that's why I asked, if you're here pre-revenue, what the hell are you doing here? So let me share what happened to me. I was putzing around in this company called Rudy Karsan, which was a predecessor to Kenexa. And we were primarily a service company before we pivoted to the product side and built Kenexa on the product side, which was a strategy we implemented later on, much, much later on. And I mentioned to you I've started a bunch of businesses. Well, one of the businesses that I had started was distribution of pharmaceutical drugs in the Commonwealth of Independent States after the Iron Curtain came down in 1992. So the Soviet Union imploded basically, 15 countries were created, the borders were open, and everyone was rushing in back in 1992. How many of you have heard of Panadol? Okay, a few people here. Basically, Panadol is the Tylenol of Europe. Same formula, different distributor. It's the #1 painkiller in Europe. I got the exclusive rights of distribution of Panadol in the Commonwealth of Independent States after hustling my butt for about 3 months. Nobody else wanted to enter into this barren land. I'm out there hustling, trying to develop distribution systems, trying to find advertisers, going through with my partners, discussing it with them. I'm in St. Petersburg. It's October of 1992, a day with freezing rain. The guy I'm supposed to meet with is in a meeting. I decide to take a walk. The street signs are in Cyrillic. I don't read Cyrillic, and I don't have any sense of direction. I still on Route 30 can't tell you whether I'm going east or west if I don't look at the GPS. I really am weak at that stuff, really bad. I turn the corner, and 2 guys with AK-47s have been pointed to me. I don't shit my pants, but I do piss my pants, okay? So I'm faced here with 2 guys with a machine gun right up to my face in a country where I don't speak the language, don't read the signs, it's freezing rain. I'm just absolutely terrified. I walked into an open air arms flea market, which is where a lot of the underworld was creating revenue after the implosion of the Soviet Union. I'd randomly, through a weird set of events, ended up there. I stared and I looked at them. They didn't speak English. Finally, somebody comes out and says, "What are you doing here?" Not in very good English. And I replied, not in very good English, because I'm kind of stammering at this point in time, just taking a walk. And they look at one another and they just wave. I turn around and I head off. Obviously, I'm scared. I end up in the drug district. Somebody pulls a knife on me. I'm running as hard as I can. Not very good. I'm still kind of old and fat. I make it out, and I decide this isn't for me. I'm going to stay focused on my core business. I end up selling that license, didn't make a lot of money, but didn't lose money. And at that point in time began the focus on Rudy Karsan to start to consolidate the organization. So while the grass may be greener on the other side of the fence, and often it is, if you don't know what that grass is made up of, and you're not aware of the guns that sit there, be really careful before you go over the fence. Stay focused in your own stomping grounds, so to speak. And so that was the second big lesson I learned. It's whatever I do, have a certain amount of focus to it, because if I miss on the focus, I'm going to screw up. Third lesson I learned. One of the things that when you get to be my age, and I look around, I'm twice the age of anyone else in this room. So when you get to be as old as me, you sort of start to know yourself. And one of the things I've realized about myself is I'm a greedy motherfucker, okay? I love money. I love counting it. I love feeling it. I love everything to do with money. I love experiences. I love learning. And my appetite's so big that no matter how much you shovel my way, it's not enough. I want more. And once I realize how greedy I am, It's the one way that every single time I went into technical, either default or bankruptcy, which I've done 4 times. How many of you have ever stolen from your kids? I have. I was so broke once, I had to actually go to the piggy bank to break it open to pay enough gas to go hammer a check to save a company. Every time I went and approached bankruptcy, and was in technical bankruptcy 4 times, once with the sheriff at the door, and I was literally counting out money, cash, was because of my greed. And the one which was the worst of the bunch, when I got really greedy, is because we were trying to, my partner and I were in a big fight in 1999. And I was trying to sell the company. We ended up, I mean, to the point where he was threatening my children. I had to get security guards on them. And we're friends now. It all ended amicably. His son-in-law worked at Kenexa. But I mean, this was serious shit, right? Like when you start calling security guards to cover your kids, you know, I mean, these things aren't that much fun. But what had happened was he thought I was trying to pull a move on him by bringing in outside capital to buy him out. And I said, we have no choice. We can't afford to buy you out based on our cash flow. So I redid our financial statements at the end of a year, that was end of 98, so that I would take all the losses and show profits in the future. Well, because I was greedy, I knew that that would put the company in the best possible light, give the best possible deal in terms of getting the most amount of money from the VC guys or the PE guys, depending on which direction we were going to go. However, I made a slight mistake. When I did that, when we wiped out some of our assets, we broke all our covenants. So now the debt holders were starting to put Connexa on workout. Now, being as greedy as I was, I thought the easiest way around that problem would be to go buy another company and go borrow some more money. Because, you know, you hear these stories in newspapers. When you owe a little to the bank, they own you. But when you owe a lot to them, you own them. It's bullshit. They own you anyway. But I wanted to experiment and find out for myself. Let me tell you, no matter how much you owe them, they still own you. And every time I pushed it too far and let my greed take over my actions, I came so close that but for the grace of God, I would have tipped over. So in every single story where that happened, the most recent one when I was technically bankrupt was in 2003, 2 years before we went public. In 2002, our largest client then, and I knew it too, was called Univans. And they were putting these mobile stores in Sears, and we were giving them all the infrastructure. And their debt had mounted to 2 times our profit. And because the financial statements were looking fine, I got greedier and greedier to the point when they went belly up in January of 2003, we were penniless. And we had to navigate our way through it. So greed is good, but up to a point. Don't push it over the edge. Don't make the same mistakes I did. And I'll share one final story with you, and then open it up for Q&A. And that's the mistake of the ego. Okay, so bear in mind, you're looking at a guy in his late 50s. When I was in my 30s and 40s, I really was a legend in my own mind. I thought I was God's gift to the business world, and boy, I sucked. But I didn't know that. Okay? So everything that we did ourselves. And one of the sharpest lessons I learned was in 2008 when we had the massive recession. Because that ego in believing we're better than anybody else meant that we had no partners. And we just heard Diane do a great presentation on partnerships and channels. Well, by the time 2008 rolled around, 3% of Connexxus revenues were from partners. All the other companies in our space had closer to 25% of their revenues coming in from partners. And when the 2008 recession hit, our revenues dipped neither one of our competitors dipped, because their partners saved their hides. And so it's good to have an ego, because you can't be a founder and you can't start companies, but understand that when you push that boundary too far, you will pay a price. And so, as you sit here, I live vicariously through your dreams. And all I can do is hope to share some of the mistakes I made, and that you don't make the same mistakes I did. So on that note, let me open up for Q&A, thoughts, comments, insults. I'll take them all. The question is, what are you doing with yourself now? I'm lost. I was so totally connected with Kinnexa, and it became so much a part of my identity. So the other day I said, okay, I'm going to go around telling people I'm an investor. So I've done about 2 other hacks. Opened up an operating fund called Carlani, where we do kind of growth capital. So we have about 30 million AUM. Anyone that's already got revenues and is looking for growth capital, give me a call. We may or may not see something in common. Remember, I'm greedy, so I'll want more. You're greedy, you'll want to give less. And my wife said, when you say investor, you sound like you're semi-retired. And that just absolutely irked me. So the short answer is I'm lost. I've started 2 companies. I've started an operating fund. I sit on 3 boards. I interviewed for a couple of Fortune 500 CEO roles. I didn't want to go back into the kind of running big companies. And so maybe this is my destiny. I'm not sure. But I'm having a good time trying to figure it out. I've got one more item left on my bucket list, and that is I want to play in the World Series of Poker, but I don't want to pay the money. I want to earn my way through it, so I'm practicing for that. Was that a question? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the early stages of growing Kinnexa?
Question is, can you talk a little bit about the early stages of growing Kinnexa? Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was 25 years ago. So the way we came to okay, so just to give you a bit of context, I was born in Kenya, moved stateside via England and Canada. I don't want this to be a tape, but my wife we worked through the borders, and we're citizens now, so everything's fine, but you guys got the idea, okay? So we came to this country really, like most non-Americans, this was the Holy Land, right? I mean, 54% of the people outside America want to be here, and I love this country. I mean, I can't say how much I love this country. So to those of you that are Native Americans, to your fathers, to your mothers, to your grandparents, I give my ultimate gratitude to. It's on your shoulders we stand. Thanks to the political system that your parents founded, I was able to find my way into this country. And so my wife and I came into this country on a lark. We're both professionals. I'm an actuary. She's in the health field. We kind of walked our way in. And the whole idea was to be here for 2-3 years, look at the country, and then maybe find a way back and work in a job. And the early years were all around just survival. So the first business plan I had was being an actuary. I did actuarial consulting, and then I did actual headhunting, because I called up all the Canadian actuaries and said, how many of you want to move down to the US, increase your salary by 50%? There's about 500 actuaries in Canada and 5,000 in the US. Out of the 500, 10% said yes. So those 50 actuaries that I moved, I get 17 times my annual salary, 30% of 5, you can work the math out. That kept me going for like 2-3 years. And then a funny thing, the business started getting traction. We had $1 million in revenue. About 4 years into it, we almost went belly up. We had one of the recession points. I was getting ready to go back. survived that, and then we kind of took off. And I think at the early stage, I think if I look back now, what are the attributes of that business? It's two things. One, the ability to be resilient, to bounce back, because the disappointments far outweigh any of the victories. In the early stages, it's all about managing disappointment. And the second thing that I learned is flexibility trumps everything. The ability to be able to pivot and repivot kind of absolutely wins in the end. And in today's day and age, it's relatively easy to start a company, right? Because when I started this company, Kenexa, I actually borrowed from my credit card about $5,000 bucks, and that's how we started. And I was completely tapped out. We bought it, and we got lucky. Today, it's relatively easy. It costs a lot less. Scaling is brutal in today's environments. In the hatches I'm working, I can get businesses off the ground for under 100,000, sometimes 50, sometimes 25, if I assume labor is free with the partners that I have. But scaling is brutal. So I think from some of the lessons that I've learned, I don't know how appropriate it is today, because startup is relatively easy. So if startup is relatively easy and scaling is really hard, you don't get that initial few punches in the face that you have in the first 2, 3, 4 months like you did in the old days. So what I would say is, in the early stages, if I was kind of starting with no money today, I would assume that my punches are going to come a year or two down the road. And it's all about cash, guys. I know you hear it all the time. Every single story I've told you was cash evaporating. It's all about the cash. And I know it sounds kind of silly, me saying that, but that's just the world I come from, okay? So yeah, the WhatsApp that sold for 19 billion with no revenues, true, but last year there were 6.8 million startups, and the year before that there were 7.1. And you know, you can give me 2 or 3 stories like that. If you're going to win a lottery, you can win it. Some companies have successfully done it. In a bubble, you can get massive valuation, navigate through it, that's great. But other than that, it's all about the cash. You have no cash, you're out of luck, man. I don't care how you get it, beg, borrow, steal. But without the cash, you're useless. The reason for the enterprise existing is all about creating of cash. And the first time you learn how to create cash is when you make your first sale. And so it's all about sales. And that's why I like some of the stuff that I heard from some of the earlier speakers when you're talking about channeling. Well, channels made up 50% of your revenues. You better pour in a lot of effort and energy into it. Getting traction, find new ways to get revenue. It's all about that. Every morning I wake up, the one sheet of paper I still have in my pocket on the startups is what were the sales yesterday. I know that number. Always carry that number. Have carried it for almost 30 years now. In any business I'm involved in, I know what the sales were in the previous day. Always reported sales. Absolutely imperative piece of information. I saw a hand go up over there. Change your mind? Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the lessons you learned of how you kept your family support through the challenging times that you described to us?
So the question is, why didn't your wife dump you, correct? Basically, yeah. I can only share my story with you, which is, okay, so my wife and I started dating at 17, okay? We are the best of friends, and today, even if I don't see her for a couple of days, I mean, it's a physical pain, and it's not that kind of physical pain, guys. It's just like, we're just really close, okay? She is amazing in that there are few people on the planet I've met that really, truly don't care about money. So my wife is one of them. She doesn't care about money. We're reasonably well off, right? I mean, it's public information. We're worth a lot of money. She still cuts her coupons, and her grocery bill is still $20 a week. I don't know how she does it. We still don't go out to eat because it saves us money. We still eat at home. So she knows, and she knew how to take air and turn it into money. So that was her talent. And because A, she didn't care about it, and B, she was really good at manufacturing food for free, it kind of took care of her basic need, which was food. I had a simple rule with the kids, which is the two ends of the day were for me. I would always drop them to school every day. Regardless of where school was, I'd drive them to school, and I would always put them to bed. Those were my inviolable rules. Everything else in between sucked. I went to one baseball game or softball game with my kids. I attended 3 parent-teacher conferences, and that was it. But what that did was the individual relationship with each child is strong enough today that if you see the 3 of us as we were in Turks and Caicos over the holidays, the family gets together. And when the 3 of us are playing a card game, we're at each other's throats. This is not a parent with 2 children. These are 3 mean people, each trying to win. Right? So we had developed this relationship. And one of the things that I learned was when I put my children to bed, there was 2 things that I would do. I would always give them a massage and always tell them a story. So no matter how bitchy they got in their adolescent years, they're both girls, it didn't matter. The massage still trumped it, and hearing a story still won out. And the other thing is, for me personally, I had a really simple rule. It was called the 3 S's. If it didn't have to do with the 3 S's, I didn't care. And the 3 S's were sex, suicide, and substance. You can go pierce your bodies, you can come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, I really don't care. As long as it stays away from those 3 S's. Because all 3 are one-way streets up until the time you're about 18. And then you're on your own. So that was the relationship with the, and my wife is one of 11, so she had extended families galore all around the world, so our vacations were really cheap. We'd go over and kind of smooch off family members around the world. So all we had to do was get kind of frequent flyer tickets from all the traveling I did, so we used to travel for free and that kind of stuff. So my wife is the ultimate in not caring about money and making it through doing basically nothing, just taking coupons and manufacturing it out of thin air. And then the rest of the stuff kind of worked out. So, but to this day, if you ask me what I'm most grateful for, is the relationships I have with my kids. Even though they're now 27 and 30, I probably talk to each of them at least either through email, text, over the phone. My elder daughter and I work together in Carolina. She's helping me right now because I'm lost. So she's kind of coaching me and getting me to think differently. She's a new mother now, so I'm really grateful to her. My younger daughter is kind of lost in her job as well. She's not sure where she's going, so we're helping one another, and we're really good friends.
Earlier you said that your biggest regret was the 25% loss of wealth, which was due to fear because of just not having the data. You also said that you were very greedy of wealth.
That's a really good question. So you said the question, or at least the way I heard it, was you said your biggest regret was losing the 25%, and you also said you're a greedy motherfucker. How do you reconcile the two? Right? Was that? To me, if I came across as saying that was my biggest regret, that's wrong. The loss of the money wasn't my biggest regret. It was my biggest pain. But that's not the same thing. I mean, pain is a lot different to me than regret. The way kind of I reconcile it is the way I think, and I think the way most humans think, is you have 2 parts of the brain. Actually, you have 3 parts. You have your reptilian brain, which controls your basic physical actions. Then you've got your emotional and you've got your rational brain, right? The thing about it is if the most powerful is the reptilian brain, then the emotional brain, and then the rational brain. So if you're ever in conflict between data and emotion, emotion always wins. Since personally I'm aware of it, I now start using data to overcome it. So the way I rationalized it was, if you make enough money, if you make more money, thumbs up or down? Thumbs up, thank you. If you make more money than you're going to spend in your life, you're okay. And I'm not going to spend the money we've made. I may lose it all through trying different ventures. And with the number of people that are approaching, asking for a couple of million to start up their company, it's quite possible I might be out of money by the end of this year, assuming no victories along the way. The biggest risk I have in my mind is not leading a most engaging life. So to me, that would be the biggest risk. And so I've constantly got that up front and center. So I'm constantly modulating my behavior to say, am I living the most engaged life I can live today?
Since you've been acquired, knowing that flexibility is the number one success factor for a business, do you find that you're able to be more flexible or less flexible in your space?
The question is, since we're acquired, am I more flexible or less flexible? So the deal with IBM was that we had a handshake, and I said I'd be around for as long as they needed me, up to a couple of years. We kind of agreed. And, you know, a handshake is a lot worse than a contract, right? Because you can always figure out your way around a contract. A handshake's really tough, because once you've given it, you got to stick around. So last spring, I started groveling and begging and telling the folks at IBM, you no longer need me. And they fortunately agreed by the third quarter, so I was out of there. So I've been out of IBM now for about 2.5, 3 months. And that has given me a tremendous feeling of relief. And I'm way happier today than I was 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I was completely constricted. In a larger company, you reach a point where it's all about risk mitigation rather than growth. At IBM and a lot of Fortune 500 companies are very much around the risk mitigation mode. And so I find that environment very stifling. 1, 2, 3, 1.
If the data is not readily available, what do you do to help yourself make decisions?
So the question is, if the data is not readily available, what do you do to make decisions? That's where you're hitting one of a belief system. I'm an actuary by profession, so I went through very rigorous training, wrote 10 exams, and from my vantage point, the data is always available. Keep searching till you find it. Okay?
Hi, my name is Melissa. I work at Ventureport, which is a co-working space here in Philly. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, after you let go of wanting to do everything yourself and keep it really close, how your community helped you succeed.
So the question is, when did it shift from becoming more about I and more about we rather than about I? Is that kind of the core of the question? I would say it was a gradual growth rate. One of the things that I learned was, out of the business that I've started, any business that I started on my own, guess what I've done 7 of them. Guess what the residual value is of the combined 7? Does anyone want to guess? 0, you got it. I am such a total fuck-up failure when it comes to doing something on my own. It took me a while to learn that lesson. So given that I'd learned that lesson probably 10, 12 years ago, everything became all about we. And in fact, the bestseller I wrote had the book was called We. So it shifted very much from I to we. It doesn't express itself in the presentation because that was more about the lessons I learned, but it was very much about we and building the team. One of the things I'm proudest of is Kinnexa created almost 80 millionaires. So that's something I'm really, really proud of. 2, 3.
So you started a lot of businesses, and so there's probably different draws to each of the businesses. Sometimes you have a personal interest in a particular cause. Maybe sometimes you just see a big market need, and other times you probably see, I have the skills to accomplish this thing. What ultimately is most important when you actually decide to just drop everything and say, this is the venture I'm going to do? Is there one of those that you think is most important?
There's one other thing that I've learned about myself is every business that I started with the sole purpose of making money failed. Again, residual value was 0. It had to meet one of two needs. Either I was changing the world in some form or another. So Connexa was founded by serving humanity because there was a fundamental belief that an engaged employee is a better parent, a better partner, a better spouse, and most importantly, a better community member. And so the two words we founded Connexa on were serving humanity through employee engagement. It actually changed the world, and one of the data points I'm proudest of is when we began our journey, 0% of Fortune 500 companies had employee engagement as part of their dashboard. By the time we sold to IBM, that number had reached 60%, and we were a major driver of that. It wasn't just the software, it was the philosophy and the thought process that we were teaching along with selling our software. The other thing is, if you're not solving a problem, then inevitably you're going to fail. So the way I kind of, when I'm working with a lot of so Carlani has done 17 investments in the last year and a half. And we do investments on an active and a passive basis. So passive is you come in, we write you a check, and then we pray. Okay, so that's the model we use there. Active is we say, we'll put in the money, you don't have to sign anything, but you start working with me like you're part of Connexa. I'll teach you everything about how to develop dashboards, how we scale, what are the things we do, how do we overcome some of these issues. And you have to commit to spending half an hour a week with me minimally, and you have to commit to bringing about change and executing on the change on anything we decided, or you say no, because it's your decision and your company, because we'll never own greater than 50% of the company, so it's your company, and none of this stuff is in writing. So with all the active investments that we work with, I spend a lot of time trying to say, how are we changing the world? So I'll give you a very specific example. We just did a PIPE, which is a private investment in a public company. It was all around energy efficiency. And in the discussions I had with the CEO, Marcelo, we're changing, we're pivoting the messaging. It's not about energy efficiency. With the story we're starting is we're going to change the world by making it safer through less depletion of fuels. That's the underlying message. Now we'll tighten it up as time goes on. I'll give you another example. We've come, one of the and this company is doing 30, 35, 40 million. So it's an existing public company in Australia. They're moving to the US. So it's a mature organization, been around for 10, 12 years. And I worked with Marcelo. But another one is a software company, which is doing 120, 150 million. We're kind of pumping in quite a bit of money, working with that owner. And the message is, why do we have that software? Not that we have it and brings about efficiency. How does it change humankind? And until we get to that essence of the story, I believe we'll plateau. So fundamentally, to me, it's all about either changing the world in some form or another, or solving a problem. And if people, so the example I gave you of the active, if you and I work actively, I'm not going to charge you anything. It's all on a handshake. We've got the best engineers around, former CFOs of publicly held companies, myself. I mean, there's a team, a marketing guy that's absolutely the best on the planet. But after 3 to 6 months of working with you, we're going to say to you, okay, was there value in this relationship? And if there isn't value, don't pay us anything. And if there is value, we expect to be paid in founder's stock. Now, if you say we're not going to pay you, we'll say, fine, we'll move you to passive. And we'll continue to pray. We're not going to be enemies. You just didn't see value, and we're okay with that. We'll move on to the next one. So to me, there's a lot about purpose in an enterprise that ultimately drives its success. What are you democratizing? Why are you doing what you're doing? Things of that sort. Rahim, I'll take one more, and then I'll have to close it because I'm watching the time.
How did Connexa end up in Philly? And now that it's out of your hands, what did you get?
The only reason Connexa ended up in Philly, it was the only place I could afford a home. When I left there, the 5 centers of insurance when I left Canada were Boston, Hartford, New York, Washington, and Philly. I wanted to be in an A school district. Philly was the only place that I could afford a home. It's really that simple. Now I'm in Philly. My wife and I have looked. We are moving from Bryn Mawr into the city. We made a very conscious decision to stay in Philly. Our elder daughter lives on Green and 21st. Our younger daughter is on Broadway and 17th in New York City. It's kind of the center, but most importantly, I kind of love Philly. It's grown on me. I truly, given that, you know, I literally carry 4 passports and have lived in 4 different countries, 6, 7 different cities, have landed immigrant status in 2 other countries. I have a choice, and I've chosen Philly because of, I think, at the end of the day, 3 reasons. 1, it's proximity to action. I can be from New York to Washington very, very quickly. 2, I actually love the heritage, the culture, the arts, the universities, the eds, the meds of the city. There is just something visceral about being in that environment. And number 3, it's still one of the cheapest, greatest cities to live in. And I'm cheap and I'm greedy, so it kind of fits the bill. So let me finish with one final comment. What we don't realize today in humanity is that we're leading a life that is absolutely in the golden years of humanity. By any metric we wish to measure, life expectancy, health, reduction in poverty, human rights, wealth creation, communication, any measure, we are living in absolutely the best of times. Deaths due to hostilities are down by 99% since the decade of the Second World War, down 50% from 20 years ago. And even when you hear in the newspaper about the problems in the Middle East, they're but a drop in the bucket. We are living a life that our grandparents cannot understand. And the biggest risk, I think, that exists in society today is the lack of meaningful work. Because without that meaningful work, where our hearts sing to do what we were born to do cannot be fulfilled. And given that we are living in the golden age of humanity and in the golden years of entrepreneurship, the people in this room combined together are going to create jobs. So to this group, I would say, as I look into the future, not only do I say thank you very much for not only me and my children, thank you very much for the sake of humanity, but most importantly, you are on a really noble cause. Enjoy it, relish in it, and let me live vicariously through it. So as I look into the future, my thoughts and prayers are, may you accomplish everything your heart desires. Good luck, God bless.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this program. For more information on Founder Factory and the Philly Startup Leaders, visit phillystartupleaders.org. We produce this program in the studios of the Lubetkin Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at beingthemedia.com. For everyone at Philly Startup Leaders and the Lubetkin Media Companies, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.